Captain Hyun-woo was fixing a broken pipe in the cargo hold when the alarm started beeping. The sound echoed through the small trading ship like an angry bird. The pipe was old and rusty, just like everything else on the vessel, but it was their home, and they made it work. So Young crawled out from under the engine with oil stains on her face and work clothes. She was the best engineer Hyun-woo had ever worked with, even though she was only 23 years old. Her hands were always dirty, but she could make any machine run with spare parts and hope. The message light was flashing blue on the main console, which meant it was from somewhere far away. Min-soo was at the navigation station trying to figure out where they were going next. Ji-ho was young and always excited about everything, especially when strange messages arrived from unknown. Hyun-woo walked to the console and pressed the message button. A hologram appeared in the air showing symbols that looked like they were dancing. The ship computer made strange noises as it tried to translate the alien writing. After a few minutes, words appeared in the air in Korean. The message was from something called the Dominion Council. Hyun-woo had heard of them. They were the group that controlled most of the galaxy and made decisions about trade and war. The message said there was a competition, a survival test on a planet called Keth-7. One person from each species would be dropped on the planet with basic supplies. They had to survive for 30 days. The winner would get control of 3-star systems. So Young whistled low and long. 3-star systems meant more money than they could spend in 10 lifetimes. It meant trade routes and mining rights and the chance to be more than just a small cargo ship running between colonies. But there was a problem. The message was supposed to go to Earth Defense Command, not to their little trading vessel. Someone had made a mistake and sent the invitation to the wrong. Hyun-woo read the message again. The planet Keth-7 was described as extremely dangerous. The air was poisonous to most life forms. The weather changed from burning hot to a freezing cold without warning. The animals were all predators that had evolved to kill anything that moved. 12 species were invited to compete. Each one was famous for being tough and dangerous. The Vorthak were 8 feet tall with skin like armor. The Zilani could live in space without protection. The Krim had technology that could change the shape of matter. Humans were not supposed to be in this competition. Earth had only been part of the galactic community for 15 years. Most aliens still thought humans were weak and primitive. The deadline to respond was in 6 hours. If they said yes, they would be picked up in 3 days. If they said no, the invitation would be canceled and they would never get another chance. One came up from the medical bay, where she had been checking their supplies. She was older than the others and had seen more of the galaxy. She looked at the message and shook her head. "This is crazy," she said. "These aliens have been fighting and surviving for thousands of years. We are just traders. We fix things and carry cargo from one place to another." But Hyun-woo was thinking about his childhood on a farming colony. His grandmother had taught him how to find food anywhere, how to make meals from things other people would throw away. His grandfather had shown him how to trap animals and preserve meat without modern equipment. The colony had been poor, but nobody ever went hungry. Because they knew how to work with what they had. They grew vegetables in soil that experts said was too poor for farming. They caught fish in streams that were supposed to be empty. Ji-ho was reading more about the competition. The other species were bringing advanced weapons and survival equipment. The Vorthak representative was a famous warrior who had never lost a battle. The Zilani competitor could eat things that would kill most other life forms, but Hyun-woo remembered what his grandmother always said. The strongest tree is not always the one that survives the storm. Sometimes it is the one that bends without breaking. He looked at his crew. So Young could fix anything with basic tools. Min-soo could navigate by the stars. If all the computers failed, Ji-ho could learn any language in a few days. One could treat injuries with whatever medicines she could find. They were not warriors or scientists, but they were survivors. They knew how to make do with nothing, how to turn problems into solutions, how to keep going when everything went wrong. The message was still floating in the air, waiting for an answer. In 5 hours and 30 minutes, the opportunity would be gone forever. So Young wiped her hands on a rag and looked at the others. "What do you think?" she asked. "Are we crazy enough to try?" Min-soo pulled up star charts on his screen showing the location of Keth-7. The planet was in a dangerous part of the galaxy where few ships traveled. The weather reports made it sound like hell. With Ji-ho was translating more details about the competition. Each participant could bring 50 pounds of equipment. And supplies, the rules were simple: survive for 30 days, using anything you can find, or Makehi 1 was checking their medical supplies and making lists of what they would need. The emergency medical kit was small but complete. She had treated everything from broken bones to alien diseases. Xianhua walked to the small kitchen where he kept his cooking supplies. His grandmother had given him a collection of spices and seasonings from their home world. The containers were small, but they could make any food taste better. He thought about the other competitors with their advanced weapons and survival gear. They would try to fight the planet to force it to let them live, but maybe there was another way. Maybe instead of fighting the dangerous creatures, you could learn to understand them. Maybe instead of avoiding the poisonous plants, you could find ways to make them safe. Maybe survival was not about being the strongest, but about being the smartest. The deadline was getting closer. Haiyanwu had to make a decision that would change all their lives. They could forward the message to Earth Defense Command and let professional soldiers handle the competition, or they could take the biggest risk of their lives and try to win 3-star systems with nothing but basic tools and the knowledge their grandparents had taught them. The alarm beeped again, reminding them that time was running out. Yunwu looked at each member of his crew and saw the same expression on all their faces. They were scared, but they were also excited. This was the chance they had been waiting for their whole lives. He walked to the communication console and started typing their acceptance message. The Dominion Council was about to learn that sometimes the most dangerous competitor is the one nobody expects to win. The message was sent with 4 minutes to spare. 3 days later, a ship the size of a small moon appeared next to their cargo vessel, and their real adventure began. The transport ship was like nothing Haiyanwu had ever seen before. It was made of crystal and metal that seemed to grow together like living things. The walls glowed with soft light that changed colors as they walked through the corridors. Other competitors were already aboard, and each one looked like they could kill a human with their bare hands. The Vorthak representative was named Gorth, and he was 8 feet tall with skin that looked like black armor. His eyes were yellow, and they never blinked. When Gorth saw the humans, he made a sound that might have been laughter, but sounded more like rocks grinding together. Soft skins, he said in broken standard language. You will feed the scavengers before the first week. And Xianwu just nodded and smiled. He had learned long ago that it was better to let people underestimate him than to argue with them. Later they would find out what he could do. The Zolani competitor was called Vash, and she was tall and thin with blue skin that seemed to shimmer in the light. She could unhinge her jaw like a snake and eat things that would kill most other species. Her teeth were sharp and black. The Krim representative looked like a walking machine with metal arms that could change shape. Its name was something that sounded like static. When it spoke, it had built-in tools that could cut through solid rock. There were others too. The Nethys could make food from sunlight like a plant. The Gorvani had 4 arms and could see in complete darkness. The Telex could survive in temperatures that would boil water. For 3 days they traveled through space toward Keth 7. During that time, Haiyanwu watched the other competitors and learned about their strengths and weaknesses. They were all apex predators from worlds that had made them strong through constant fighting, but they all thought the same way. They understood survival as a battle to be won through superior force or natural advantages they would try to dominate the planet through strength and advanced technology. When they finally saw Keth 7 through the viewing port, it looked like a sick green marble covered with angry red clouds. The planet spun fast, creating weather that could change from deadly heat to freezing cold in just a few hours. The briefing about the planet was terrifying. The forests were full of creatures that had evolved to kill anything that moved. The air contained spores that could eat through metal. The water was acidic enough to dissolve bone. Each competitor was allowed to bring 50 pounds of equipment. The Vorthak brought weapons and armor that could stop energy blasts. The Zolani brought high-tech survival gear that could create shelter and purify water. The Krim brought molecular tools that could build anything from raw materials. The Nethys brought solar collectors and nutrient processors. The other species brought similar advanced equipment. The Tianwu team brought something different. They had basic tools like knives and rope and fire starters. They brought seeds for vegetables that could grow in poor soil. They brought a small medical kit and water purification tablets. But the thing that made the other competitors laugh was a small container of Salt, sugar, and spices that So Young had insisted they bring food taste better when it is not trying to kill you, she had said. The drop pods were small metal spheres that would protect them during the fall to the planet's surface. Each competitor was placed in a different region of the same continent, roughly 50 miles apart. The inside of the pod was cramped and uncomfortable. Han Wu could hear the wind screaming outside as they fell through the atmosphere. The pod shook and rattled like it was going to break apart. When they finally hit the ground, the impact was so hard that Han Wu saw stars for a few seconds. The pod door opened with a hiss and the smell of the planet rushed in. It was like rotting meat mixed with chemicals. The forest around him was alive with movement and sound. Trees had bark that oozed yellow sap and leaves that moved even when there was no wind. The ground was covered with things that might have been plants or animals or both. Within minutes of leaving the pod, something attacked his shelter. It looked like a cross between a spider and a snake, with fangs that dripped poison and eyes that glowed in the dark. Its bite would have killed him instantly, but Hyun Woo had grown up on a farming colony where similar creatures lived in the fields. He had learned to catch them for dinner when he was just a boy. He killed it with a quick strike to what he hoped was its head. Then he did something that would have horrified the other competitors. He started examining the creature to see if it was good to eat. The meat was tough and stringy, but it had a flavor that reminded him of chicken. The poison glands were easy to remove once you knew where to look. The blood was thin and dark, but it did not seem harmful. After the creature was dead that night, while the other competitors were hiding in their shelters and eating emergency rations, Hyun Woo cooked his first meal on Keth 7. He used some of the spices So Young had packed to mask the bitter taste. The meat was actually quite good when prepared properly. It had protein and nutrients that his body needed. The cooking process seemed to break down whatever toxins might have been in the tissue. As he ate, Hyun Woo listened to the sounds of the forest around him. Other competitors were fighting for their lives against creatures that seemed designed to kill. He could hear weapons firing and emergency alarms going off, but he was having dinner and planning his next meal. The daily status reports came through their emergency beacons. The news was not good for most competitors. The Nethys was struggling because the local sunlight was wrong for photosynthesis. The Gorvani had lost 2 arms to something that ate metal. Even mighty Gorth was having trouble with creatures that could bite through his armor. The Zilani was doing better, but she was burning through her high-tech equipment faster than expected. Yunwoo report was different. He was not just surviving, he was learning. The creatures were dangerous, but they followed patterns that could be understood. They had weaknesses that could be exploited. More importantly, they were all part of a food chain that had been working for millions of years. If you could figure out your place in that chain, you could survive and even thrive. The second day brought new challenges. A pack of creatures that looked like wolves with too many teeth tried to surround his camp, but Hyun Woo had set traps using techniques his grandfather had taught him. 2 of the creatures were caught and killed. The others ran away, but they would be back. He spent the morning preparing the meat and looking for ways to preserve it. The climate was hot and humid, so food would spoil quickly without proper treatment. That was when he discovered something interesting. The yellow sap from the trees was not just poison, it was also a natural preservative. When mixed with salt and heated, it created a substance that could keep meat fresh for days. By the end of the second day, Hyun Woo had caught and processed 3 different species of predators. He was learning which parts were safe to eat and which parts could be used for other purposes. The other competitors were still fighting the planet, trying to force it to let them live, but Hyun Woo was beginning to understand that maybe there was another way. Maybe instead of fighting Keth 7, he could learn to work with it. Maybe the deadliest creatures in the galaxy were not enemies to be destroyed, but problems to be solved. The third day would bring his first real breakthrough and change everything he thought he knew about survival. The third day on Keth 7 started with screaming. Not human screaming, but the sound of something dying badly in the distance. Han Woo was checking his traps when he heard it, and he knew that another competitor had just lost their fight with the planet. The forest was divided into territories controlled by different apex predators. The Shriekers were bat-like creatures that hunted in packs and could shatter bones with their screams. The Grove Walkers were tree-like entities that could move through the forest floor and grab prey with root tentacles. The Acid Spitters were exactly what they sounded like. They looked like giant frogs with mouths that could spray acid strong enough to melt through metal. The thornlings were small, but they moved in swarms of thousands, and their bites injected paralytic poison. But the most dangerous inhabitants were the void crawlers, creatures that seemed to exist partially outside normal space. They left no tracks, made no sound, and could appear anywhere. Without warning, their touch drained life force, directly leaving behind mummified husks. Daily reports from the other competitors painted a picture of struggle and desperation. The Crim had lost 2 fingers to something that ate metal and was running low on repair materials. The Nethes was slowly starving because the local sunlight was wrong for photosynthesis. The Gorvani had found shelter in a cave system, but was trapped there by a pack of shriekers that had made their nest at the entrance. The Telux was doing better in the extreme temperatures, but was struggling to find food that would not kill it. Even Mighty Gorth was having trouble. His armor was being slowly dissolved by acid rain, and the creatures seemed to be learning how to work together to attack him. Several smaller competitors had already activated their emergency beacons and been eliminated. Wu, meanwhile, was having what he would later describe as the most educational week of his life. Every morning, he would check the traps he had built using techniques passed down from his grandfather. The creatures of Keth 7 were deadly, but they were also predictable once you understood their behavior. The breakthrough came when he caught his first grove Walker. The creature was the size of a small vehicle and covered in bark that secreted a poison that could kill most galactic species within seconds. Its meat was supposedly toxic to everything except the void crawlers, who used Grove Walker corpses as nesting sites, but Han Wu had grown up eating things that city people would run away from. He had learned to process snake venom and extract useful compounds from poisonous plants. His grandmother had taught him that the difference between medicine and poison was often just a matter of preparation. He carefully extracted the poison glands using tools made from the bones of previous catches. The venom was thick and green, and it made his improvised containers smoke where it touched them. But when he diluted it with water and heated it, something interesting happened. The poison broke down into different compounds. Some were still deadly, but others were harmless. Some were even useful. The concentrated form could be used to coat weapons or preserve food. The diluted form could be used as a natural antiseptic. The meat, when properly prepared, was actually quite good. It tasted like a cross between beef and mushrooms, with a texture that reminded him of root vegetables from his home colony. But more importantly, he discovered that certain parts of the Grove Walker could be used to create natural preservatives. This was when so young spices became crucial. The basic salt helped draw out toxins, while the sugar helped neutralize bitter compounds. The other spices masked unpleasant tastes and added flavors that made the alien meat more palatable. Within days, Haiyan Wu had created something that would have been impossible on any civilized world. He had made jam, not just any jam, but a preserve that incorporated the processed remains of some of the deadliest creatures in the galaxy. The Grove Walker poison, when neutralized and concentrated, created a natural preservative that could keep food fresh for weeks. The Shrieker chitin, when ground up and mixed with local berries, created a spread that was both nutritious and surprisingly addictive. He started with simple combinations, testing small amounts to make sure they were safe, then gradually working up to more complex recipes. The acid from the spitters, when properly processed, could be used to break down tough plant fibers, making them edible. The paralytic poison from the thornlings, when diluted and heated, became a natural tenderizer that could make even the toughest meat soft and flavorful. The various berries and fruits that grew in the forest were mostly poisonous, but they also contained sugars and acids that were perfect for jam making. By the end of the first week, Haiyan Wu had created a collection of preserves that would have terrified galactic food safety inspectors. Each jar contained processed remains of creatures that were classified as extremely dangerous to all known life forms, but they tasted amazing. The combination of alien biochemistry and traditional preservation techniques had created flavors that were unlike anything in the galaxy. The jams were sweet and savory at the same time, with complex tastes that seemed to change as you ate them. The daily status reports were becoming more desperate. The Vorthak was down to emergency rations, and his armor was failing. The Zelani had found a source of clean water but was struggling with the local wildlife. Two more competitors had been eliminated. Yan Wu report was different. He was not just surviving, he was thriving. He had gained weight, his health readings were better than when he started. And he was reporting the discovery of significant food resources that he was processing for long-term storage. The Dominion Council was baffled. According to their calculations, nothing on Keth 7 was safe for human consumption. The planet ecosystem was specifically designed to be hostile to carbon-based life forms, yet somehow, this human was not only surviving but, apparently, enjoying himself. They decided to increase monitoring of his activities. A second drone was dispatched to observe his behavior and try to understand what was happening, but the real breakthrough was still to come. The moment that would change everything happened on the 10th day when Haiyan Wu encountered his first void crawler. The creature materialized at the edge of his camp like a nightmare made real. It was about the size of a large dog with skin that seemed to absorb light and tentacles that moved in ways that hurt to look at directly. Most creatures would have run or tried to fight, but Han Wu did something that no one in the galaxy had ever attempted before. He started trying to figure out how to cook it. The void crawler was said to be inedible to all known life forms. Its touch was lethal, and its blood was so toxic that a single drop could contaminate an entire water supply. But Haiyan Wu had learned something important during his time on Keth 7. The most dangerous things were often the most rewarding if you could figure out how to handle them safely, and he was about to discover that even death itself could be turned into something delicious. The void crawler stood at the edge of Haiyan Wu camp like a piece of living darkness. Its tentacles moved in patterns that seemed to bend space around them, and looking directly at it made his eyes water. But instead of running or fighting, Haiyan Wu did something that would have been considered insane by every other species in the galaxy. He started taking notes. For 3 days he observed the creature from a safe distance, learning its behavior patterns. Void crawlers were attracted to life force, but they were also incredibly lazy. They preferred to wait for prey to come to them rather than actively hunting. They also had a strange relationship with electromagnetic fields. Certain frequencies seemed to confuse them, making them flicker in and out of normal space like a badly tuned hologram. Using components from his emergency beacon and some metal wire from his supply kit, Haiyan Wu created a trap that generated a specific frequency. The electromagnetic pulse created a field that seemed to anchor the void crawler in normal space. When the creature materialized to investigate the strange energy signature, it found itself temporarily unable to phase out of reality. The trap held it for less than 30 seconds, but that was enough. Time for Haiyan Wu to act. He killed it with a spear made from Grove Walker bone reinforced with Shrieker chitin. The creature died with a sound like air being sucked out of the universe, leaving behind a corpse that seemed to absorb light. The void crawler was about the size of a large dog, but it was heavier than it looked. Its skin felt like touching ice and electricity at the same time. Its blood was black and thick, and it moved in ways that defied physics. According to everything Haiyan Wu had learned, this creature should have been impossible to eat. Its touch was lethal to all known life forms, and its blood was rumored to be so toxic that a single drop could contaminate an entire water supply. But Haiyan Wu had learned something important. During his weeks on Keth 7, the most dangerous things were often the most rewarding if you could figure out how to handle them safely. He began the most dangerous cooking experiment of his life. The creature blood, when properly diluted and processed, created a substance that was unlike anything in the galactic database. It was simultaneously a preservative, a flavor enhancer, and something that seemed to actively improve the nutritional value of anything it touched. The process was terrifying and complex. He had to work in small batches, testing each step carefully. The blood had to be heated to exact temperatures and mixed with specific ratios of other compounds. One mistake could create something that would kill him, instantly but slowly. Carefully, he began to understand the creature biochemistry. The void crawler existed partially outside normal space, which meant its cellular structure operated under different rules. When processed correctly, those rules could be changed. The breakthrough came when he realized that the creature's toxic properties were actually a form of preservation. The same compounds that made it deadly also prevented decay and contamination. When neutralized, they created the most effective preservative he had ever encountered the jam he created from void crawler extract was extraordinary. It had a deep, complex flavor that seemed to change as you tasted it. The initial taste was sweet and slightly metallic, but it developed into something that was both familiar and completely alien. More importantly, it had properties that defied scientific explanation. Food preserved with this jam did not just last longer, it actually became more nutritious over time. Proteins became more easily digestible, vitamins became more concentrated, and new beneficial compounds seemed to appear from nowhere. The daily status reports were becoming increasingly desperate. The Vorthik warrior Gorth was down to his last emergency rations, and his armor was failing. The acid rain was eating through the metal faster than his repair systems could fix it. The Zilani had found temporary shelter in a cave system, but was trapped there by a pack of shriekers that had made their nest at the entrance. She was surviving on filtered water and whatever small creatures she could catch. The Gorvani was in even worse shape. 2 of its 4 arms had been dissolved by acid, and it was struggling to operate its equipment. The Telux was doing better in the extreme temperatures, but was slowly starving because it could not find compatible food. 3 more competitors had been eliminated in the second week, bringing the total down to 7. The Dominion Council was starting to discuss ending the competition early due to the unexpectedly high casualty rate, but Hyanwu report was different. He was not just surviving, he was thriving. His health readings were better than when he started the competition. He had gained weight, his stamina had improved, and his mental clarity was sharper than ever. The monitoring drone had been watching him for days, trying to understand what was happening. The footage showed him sitting outside a shelter that had been expanded into something resembling a small homestead. He was stirring a pot over a fire, humming what sounded like a traditional earth song. Around him were organized supplies, tools made from local materials, and what appeared to be a small garden where he was growing earth vegetables in soil that should have killed them instantly. Drone sensors detected something unprecedented. The air around Hanwu camp was actually cleaner than the surrounding forest. The soil showed signs of active biological improvement. Most shocking of all, several of the local predators were visible. At the edge of the clearing, they were not hunting or attacking, they were waiting. The void crawlers had returned. Not just one, but an entire pack of them. They gathered around his camp like domestic animals, apparently waiting for him to feed them. When the drone transmitted this footage back to the Dominion Council, it created immediate panic. Emergency sessions were called. Xenobiologists who had studied Keth-7 for decades insisted that what they were seeing was impossible. The creatures Hyanwu was casually cooking were the stuff of nightmares, beings that had evolved specifically to be inedible to any form of life. They were weapons of biological warfare that had been used to sterilize entire worlds, but the evidence was undeniable. The human had not only survived contact with these creatures, he had somehow convinced them to work with him. The impossible had become routine. The human was not just surviving on Keth-7, he was domesticating the Council ordered additional monitoring drones to be deployed immediately. They needed to understand what was happening before the competition ended. They needed to know how a simple human had accomplished something that their best scientists had said was impossible, but they were already too late. The final phase of the competition was about to begin, and Hyanwu had one more surprise that would change everything. The monitoring drone arrived at dawn to find something that defied every scientific principle known to the Dominion Council. Hyanwu was sitting outside his expanded shelter, which now looked more like a small farm than a survival camp. He was stirring a large pot over a carefully maintained fire and humming what the drone translation system identified as a traditional Korean farming song. The melody was simple and cheerful, completely at odds with the deadly environment surrounding him. Around his camp were organized supplies, tools made from local materials, and neat rows of what appeared to be a vegetable garden. The earth plants were not just surviving in the toxic soil, they were thriving, growing larger and more vibrant than they ever had on their homeworld. But what made the drone sensors go haywire was the air quality readings. The atmosphere around Hanwu camp was actually cleaner than the surrounding forest. The toxic spores that should have been eating through metal were being filtered out by something. The soil analysis was even more impossible. The ground that should have been sterile and poisonous was showing signs of active biological improvement. Beneficial bacteria were breaking down toxins and converting them into nutrients. Most shocking of all, several of the local apex predators were visible at the edge of the clearing. They were not hunting or showing any signs of aggression. They were simply waiting like trained animals, expecting to be fed. You must be the monitoring drone, Hyun-woo said, looking up from his cooking. Perfect timing. I was just preparing lunch. The drone camera focused on the pot and immediately classified its contents as a weapon of mass destruction according to the analysis system. The mixture contained processed remains of at least 6 different apex predators, including substances that were classified as galactic-level toxins. A single spoonful of whatever he was cooking should have been able to kill a Vorthak warrior in seconds, yet Hyun-woo was stirring it with a wooden spoon and tasting it like he was preparing a family meal. I have been working on a special recipe, he continued, addressing the drone as if it were a dinner guest. The trick is understanding that these creatures are not really poisonous, they are just very particular about how they want to be prepared. He ladled some of the mixture into a small container. The drone sensors immediately went into emergency mode, registering threat levels that were off the scale. The concentration of toxins was so high that the drone automatic systems tried to activate a quarantine protocol. Would you like to try some? Hyun-woo asked, holding up the container. I call it Void Walker Surprise. It has a nice kick to it. The drone transmission back to the Dominion Council created immediate chaos. Emergency sessions were called on every member world. Xenobiologists who had studied Keth-7 for decades were brought in to analyze the footage. They all agreed that what they were seeing was impossible. The creatures Hyun-woo was casually cooking were the deadliest life forms known to science. They had evolved specifically to be inedible to any form of life, but the evidence was undeniable. The human was not just surviving, he was turning the most dangerous ecosystem in the galaxy into a personal kitchen. Meanwhile, the other competitors were in various states of collapse. The mighty Gorth had been forced to retreat to higher ground where the acid rain was less severe, but he was down to his last emergency rations. The Zelani had managed to escape from the cave system, but not before losing most of her equipment to the Shriekers. She was surviving on filtered water and whatever scraps she could find. The Gorvani was barely functional, with only one working arm and failing life support systems. The Telex was doing better, but was slowly starving because it could not find compatible food sources. 2 more competitors had been eliminated in the 3rd week, bringing the total down to 5. The Dominion Council was seriously considering ending the competition early due to the unprecedented casualty rate, but Hyun-woo daily reports had taken on an almost cheerful tone. He was documenting new recipes, describing flavor profiles, and apparently enjoying what he called the greatest cooking challenge of his life. His health readings were not just stable, they were improving. Every biological marker showed enhancement rather than degradation. His strength had increased, his reflexes were faster, and his mental acuity was sharper than baseline human levels. The breakthrough moment came when he successfully created what he called Galaxy Jam, a preserve that incorporated processed elements from every major predator species on Keth-7. The jam was dark purple, almost black, with a consistency that seemed to shift between liquid and solid depending on the temperature. It contained concentrated extracts from Grove Walker's Shrieker's acid, Spitter's Thornlings, and Void Crawlers. According to the drone analysis, a single spoonful of this jam contained enough concentrated toxins to kill a small army. It was by any scientific measure the most dangerous food substance ever created. When Hyun-woo tasted it, he smiled. Perfect, he said to the drone. This is exactly what I was hoping for. He began packaging the jam into containers made from treated Void Crawler hide, creating neat rows of what looked like ordinary preserves. Each container was labeled with symbols that the drone translator could not decode. Other competitors were barely hanging on. The Vorthak was showing signs of severe malnutrition and his armor was failing. The Zelani was suffering from exposure and had developed a respiratory infection from the toxic air, but Hyun-woo was thriving. He had not only survived, but had fundamentally altered the ecosystem around his camp. The deadly predators were acting like domesticated animals, bringing him prey and protecting his garden from smaller threats. The Dominion Council faced an unprecedented situation. They had created a survival test that was supposed to prove which species was the strongest. Instead, they had discovered something that challenged their understanding of life itself. Emergency meetings were held across the galaxy. Military leaders demanded to know how a primitive human had accomplished what their best scientists said was impossible. Economists calculated the value of the technology he had developed, but the philosophers and theologians were asking different questions. What did it mean when death could be transformed into sustenance? What were the implications of a species that could domesticate the very concept of extinction? The final week of the competition was approaching, and the council faced a decision that would shape the future of galactic civilization. They could end the competition early and try to suppress what they had learned, or they could let it continue and discover what other impossible things this human might accomplish. The decision would determine not just who won 3-star systems, but whether the galaxy was ready to accept that sometimes the most dangerous power was not the ability to destroy, but the ability to transform. The final week of the competition was unlike anything in galactic history. Word of the human achievements had spread throughout the Dominion Council, and emergency meetings were being held on every member world. The footage from the monitoring drones was being analyzed by the greatest scientific minds in the galaxy, and none of them could explain what they were seeing. A primitive human had not only survived, but had fundamentally altered the most dangerous ecosystem known to science. The other competitors were in various states of defeat. The mighty Gorth had been eliminated after an infected wound became life-threatening. His emergency beacon had been activated, and he was rescued barely alive. The Zelani was barely conscious, surviving on filtered water and whatever scraps she could find. Her high-tech equipment had failed, and she was showing signs of severe malnutrition. The Gorvani was down to one functioning arm, and its life support systems were failing. The Telex was doing better, but was slowly starving because it could not find compatible food sources. Only 3 of the original 12 competitors remained active, and 2 of them were clearly planning to activate their emergency beacons. The competition that was supposed to last 30 days was ending early due to the unprecedented casualty rate, but Haiyan-Wu daily reports had taken on an almost cheerful tone. He was documenting new recipes, describing flavor combinations, and apparently enjoying what he called the greatest cooking challenge of his life. His health readings were not just stable, they were extraordinary. Every biological marker showed enhancement rather than degradation. His strength had increased, his reflexes were faster, and his mental acuity was operating at levels that exceeded normal human capacity. The breakthrough moment came when he successfully created what he called Galaxy, JAMA preserve that incorporated processed elements from every major predator species on Keth 7. The jam was dark purple, almost black, with a consistency that seemed to shift between liquid and solid depending on the temperature. It contained concentrated extracts from grove walkers, shriekers, acid, spitters, thornlings, and void crawler. According to the drone analysis, a single spoonful of this jam contained enough concentrated toxins to kill a small army. It was by any scientific measure the most dangerous food substance ever created. When Haiyan-Wu tasted it, he smiled with genuine pleasure. Perfect, he said to the monitoring drone. This is exactly what I was hoping for. He began packaging the jam into containers made from treated void crawler hide, creating neat rows of what looked like ordinary preserves. Each container was labeled with symbols that the drone translator could not decode. The final day arrived with an unprecedented decision from the Dominion Council. For the first time in the competition history, they were calling for early termination. The human activities had moved beyond survival into something that was fundamentally changing their understanding of life itself. The extraction ships arrived to find Haiyan-Wu waiting with a small pile of personal belongings and several containers of his jam. He looked healthier than when he had started the competition, and he was actually humming while he packed. The other 2 remaining competitors were rescued from their hiding places. Both barely alive and showing signs of severe trauma, they were immediately placed in medical quarantine and treated for exposure to the planet-toxic environment. The award ceremony was held on the Dominion Council capital ship with representatives from all 12 species in attendance. The Great Hall was filled with beings who had ruled the galaxy for millennia, and they were all staring at one small Haiyan-Wu. Stood before the assembled aliens, still wearing his simple work clothes and holding a container of his galaxy jam. He looked completely at ease despite being surrounded by creatures that could have killed him without effort. The human has demonstrated abilities that exceed our understanding, announced the Council Speaker, a being whose species was old when the galaxy was young, the prize is awarded to the human representative but Han Wu held up his hand in a gesture that somehow managed to be both polite and commanding. Before you make it official, I think you should try this, he said. The silence that followed was absolute. Every being in the hall was focused on the small container in his hands. They all knew what it contained. According to their best scientists, it was the most dangerous substance ever created. He opened the container, and the smell that emerged was indescribable. It was the scent of every beautiful and terrible thing that had ever lived, concentrated into something that was simultaneously appetizing and terrifying. This jam is made from the deadliest creatures in the galaxy, he said calmly. According to your science, it should kill anything that eats it, but that is because you are thinking about it wrong. He took a small spoon and tasted the jam. The assembled aliens watched in horror and fascination as he savored it like a delicacy. His expression showed genuine pleasure as he experienced flavors that should not have been possible. These creatures are not poisonous, he continued. They are just very particular about how they want to be prepared. The secret is understanding that death is not the opposite of life, it is just another ingredient. The council speaker, who had lived for over 1,000 years and seen the rise and fall of civilizations, found himself at a loss for words. The implications of what he was hearing were staggering. Would anyone like to try some? Hyun Woo asked, holding up the container with a friendly smile. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of several alien dignitaries fainting. Their advanced minds could not process the concept of eating something that should have been impossible to consume, and that was how humanity earned its place in the galaxy, not through conquest or superior technology, but by making the deadliest creatures in the universe taste good. The 3 star systems were transferred to human control the next day. The council insisted on a full scientific study of Hyun Woo methods, but he just smiled and said that the recipe was a family secret. Years later, when humanity had become one of the major trading powers in the galaxy, xenobiologists would still debate how a simple farmer from a backwater colony had managed to domesticate the most dangerous ecosystem known to science. But on Earth, in the small farming communities where people still remembered how to make food from nothing, his grandmother's words were passed down to new generations. The strongest tree is not always the one that survives the storm. Sometimes it is the one that bends without breaking, and sometimes, they would add with a smile, it is the one that knows how to turn the storm into jam. The Galaxy Jam became the foundation of a new industry. Human food processing techniques spread throughout the galaxy, turning previously inedible alien creatures into gourmet delicacies. Trade routes that had been abandoned due to dangerous wildlife were reopened. Planets that had been considered uninhabitable became valuable real estate. Entire species that had been written off as impossible to work with became partners in a new galactic economy, and at the center of it all was a simple truth that Hyun Woo had learned from his grandmother on a farming colony. The difference between poison and food was often just a matter of knowing how to cook it properly. The human had not conquered the galaxy through force or technology. He had won it through the most fundamental act of civilization, the transformation of the raw and dangerous into the nourishing and beneficial. In the end, the greatest victory was not proving that humans were the strongest species, but proving that they were the most adaptable, and in a galaxy full of apex predators, that was the most valuable skill of all.